What Lies Beneath continues at 11. That's after the ITV news.
I'm being fair, not racist. Michael Howard defends plans for a crackdown on travellers. Conservative leaders' plans set off a furious war of words today. One Labour MP said they had the whiff of the gas chamber about them. We'll be assessing the plan and profiling the secretive figure behind the latest Conservative strategy. Also tonight, the right to live case. Terri Schiavo's future lies in the hands of a judge. Widower's anger, the husband of the murdered jeweller hits out at police. And Chelsea lies. UEFA's shock charge against Jose Mourinho tonight.
And in the Anglia region, how far would you go to get an NHS dentist? These people queued for nearly 8 hours.
Good evening. Denying accusations of racism and bigotry, Michael Howard spelled out his party's plans today to stop travellers setting up illegal camps. He said he'd make doing that a criminal offence. He added that he'd repeal the Human Rights Act if necessary to end the abuse of planning laws by a small minority of travellers. Labour accused him of following the agenda of the tabloid newspapers. Here's our political correspondent Angus Walker.
Unwanted and unwelcome here. This is Crays Hill site in Essex, where opposition to travellers has now become political. Michael Howard was here today looking through a security fence at the bottom of a local resident's garden across a front line in yet another pre-election skirmish.
You challenge their children and they'll give you a mouthful of abuse.
In the village hall, local people told Mr Howard they lived in fear after a traveller invasion. Sites had doubled in size, making their lives hell. The Tory leader told them he would scrap the Human Rights Act, which he said was being used to block evictions and bring in tougher planning enforcement.
If you put up an extension to your house, you'll have the council on you like a ton of bricks.
Back in Westminster, Mr Howard said travellers had to live by the same rules as anyone else.
They are openly abusing our planning system. Some people claim it's racist to raise this issue. It's not. It has nothing to do with race. It is about standing up for the right values. It's about common sense. And it's about making sure that people abide by the law.
But the new Tory traveller policies were condemned as evil by one Labour backbencher.
I think it whips up hatred against a group of people who have suffered terribly, who were the second most persecuted group under the Nazis, who lost a lot of people in the Holocaust, hence my phrase, it has a stink of the whiff of the gas chamber about it, because I think it does.
Around 5,000 caravans are parked illegally in England. But some travellers point out that a decade ago, Michael Howard's party lifted the obligation on councils to provide legal sites.
There's been a lot of publicity on the Sun campaigning to get rid of us, and he thought if he got involved in this, it's going to make him look such a big man. Well, I'll vote for him, because he'll get rid of the travellers, and that's what I think that he's playing at.
The travellers say they have rights too, that they need somewhere to live, to raise their children, and they're fearful of being demonised even more for political gain. Angus Walker, ITV News, Crays Hill Travellers Site.
The man behind Michael Howard's policy of pursuing populist causes is his campaign chief, Lynton Crosby. He's been called Australia's answer to Alastair Campbell, and he helped another Howard, John, to become Australia's Prime Minister 4 times in a row. Unlike Alastair Campbell, Mr Crosby keeps a pretty low profile. But Lauren Taylor has managed to lift the lid on how he operates.
This is the Tories' secret weapon. In Australia, his ruthless tactics helped win 4 elections. Now he's here using the same methods for Michael Howard, and commentators on the right and left agree he's the mastermind who's sharpened up the Conservative campaign.
Lynton Crosby's tactics are brilliant. They are to hit and run day after day with a quite different subject. Labour's wrong-footed every day, not knowing where the next attack's going to come from, closely integrated with most of the right-wing press who are all ready to go on the same subject every day. Huge battalions, Daily Mail, Telegraph, all piling in behind whatever the message of the day is. Before there's time to analyse it, they're on to another subject.
And for Michael Howard, the choice of subjects is very deliberate. Crosby has brought so-called wedge politics to Britain. He picks fights on divisive issues that arouse strong feelings among voters. The aim, to split the vote in two and make sure he ends up with majority support. That's what he's done today with gypsies. Immigration and border control have already dominated campaigning. Australian opposition politicians have found to their cost how effective he can be.
I think that's his stock in trade, wedge politics writ large, finding the weak points, if you like, in a society where there is some disagreement and some hurt, and then exaggerating that to the detriment of the least successful members of the society, the ones who are sitting at the margin, the ones, in fact, who most need assistance in public policy are the ones who are kicked to the edge, and their pain, in fact, is used for political advantage. It's very nasty stuff.
Good luck, and I hope we're successful.
It was for the Australian Prime Minister John Howard. Another part of the strategy is highly localised campaigning.
Door knocking, letters to constituents, postcards, and in the last election here, direct phone calls recorded by the Prime Minister to constituents. They're the sorts of things that Linton Crosby learned from the Americans, the Republican campaigners in America, and they're the kind of things I think that he can take to Britain quite successfully.
So Margaret Dixon and her shoulder operation combined going local with the hit-and-run tactic of moving on swiftly before the Tory health plans could be analysed too deeply, while repeatedly hitting core subjects like immigration. This is part of a series of posters backing up the Tories' campaign. Depending on your view, the choice of subjects either tap into the national mood or play on people's fears.
Linton Crosby seems to me a master of what the Australians call political dog whistling. Dog whistling is when a politician sends out a message on a frequency which will reach the people that he's directing the message towards without bothering people too much around the sidelines.
Now the test for Michael Howard will be whether the Crosby methods actually translate into more votes. Lauren Taylor, ITV News.
Let's talk now to our political correspondent, John Ray. John, the Conservatives appear to be having a good campaign. Why are the government apparently struggling to fight back?
Well, that's because they're fighting on many days on the Tory agenda, partly because it's easier to attack a party that's in government, but partly, I think, Trevor, because the Tories have been so good, so successful, so cute in picking the right issues. What links immigration, asylum, Margaret Dixon, the woman with the arm, and travellers? Well, it all adds up to this idea that this is a government in some way out of touch with the needs and the fears of real people. So that's what the Conservatives are doing, are fighting this very effective guerrilla action, hitting and then moving on very quickly. But to stretch the analogy, Trevor, of course, guerrilla armies very rarely go on to form actual governments.
Yes, that's the question, really, isn't it? Will any of this translate into hard votes?
Well, history tells us that it is possible to win the campaign and lose the election. That's exactly what happened to Neil Kinnock back in 1992. Convinced people he was good as an opposition leader, but not as a prime minister. The polls so far are mixed, but one in tomorrow's Guardian gives the Labour an 8-point lead, a big bounce after the budget. That will be a lot of heart to Labour strategists who will argue that on the big issues that matter, the economy, health, so forth, people still trust us in the Labour government.
John Ray, thank you. Another legal battle in the right to life or death of a brain-damaged woman is taking place in a Florida court tonight. A judge is deciding whether to reconnect Terri Schiavo's feeding tube. That's what her parents have asked for. But her husband said she'd want to be allowed to die. The case has sharply divided political and public opinion in America. Robert Moore joins us now from Washington. Robert?
Well, Trevor, Congress reconvening in the middle of the night, the president abandoning his holiday. Last night, you would have thought America was in the midst of some great national crisis. In fact, the legal and political frenzy was about one woman in Florida and her right to life. And just over 2 hours ago, the whole case went before a federal judge.
We want mercy. No human being has the right to play God.
Congress does not reconvene lightly, but here the politicians were in the early hours of this morning, fired up and passing emergency legislation, all designed to force doctors to reinsert a feeding tube into Terri Schiavo.
She is alive. She is still one of us.
This is the woman whose tragic life story is at the centre of this raging debate. Terri Schiavo suffered severe brain damage 15 years ago. Her husband says she should be allowed to die with dignity. But her parents insist Terri has some quality of life and must be kept alive.
Oh, precious.
Christian conservatives have flocked to the cause, saying it's about preserving the culture of life in America. President Bush is so involved that he interrupted his vacation in Texas and was woken up in the middle of the night to sign a special law that moves this case for the first time into a federal court.
But in extraordinary circumstances like this, it is wise to always err on the side of life.
But Terri's husband is contemptuous of those he says are exploiting his family's tragedy.
It's a sad day for Terri, and it's a sad day for everybody in America because the government is going to trample all over your personal and private matters. This is an outrage. They have no business in this matter.
All eyes are now on this federal court in Tampa, Florida. Will the judge order doctors to reinsert Terri Schiavo's feeding tube? Or will he dismiss as unconstitutional the law passed last night by Congress? That feeding tube was removed on Friday, and if nothing changes, Terri is expected to die within 10 days. Her family is divided. So too is America. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
The United Nations is set for the biggest, boldest revamp in its 60-year history. UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan is recommending an expansion of the Security Council to make it more representative, the creation of a new human rights body, and writing a new definition of terrorism. He denied that the timing of this announcement was linked to recent criticism of the organization. The jeweller who saw his wife shot dead in their shop in Nottingham rounded on local police chiefs today. Victor Bates blamed Chief Constable Steve Green for the city's lawlessness. Mr. Green has gone on record as saying he doesn't have the resources to cope with the number of murders. Today, a 19-year-old was found guilty of being an accomplice in Marion Bates's murder. Geraint Vincent reports.
Murdered while trying to protect her family, murdered for 3 pairs of earrings and a necklace. On a Tuesday morning 2 years ago, Marion Bates and her husband were in their Nottingham jewellery shop when 2 gunmen burst in. A gun was pointed at Marion's daughter. Marion threw herself in front of her and was shot dead. One of those robbers was today convicted of murder, but the man who police think pulled the trigger has never been found. Victor Bates asked police for more protection several times before his wife's death. Now he's still shattered by grief and still very angry.
A common joke in the national newspapers, if you want to commit a murder, do it in Nottingham, they won't catch you. The resources, such as they are overstretched. Mistakes in organisation have been made.
Victor has described Nottinghamshire's Chief Constable, Steve Green, as a menace to law and order. His force is in deep crisis. The murder rate is soaring. There have been 21 in the last 4 years. Last week, Mr. Green admitted his constabulary couldn't cope, and he asked for more officers. Within days, the Home Office announced an inquiry into the way the force is being run amid calls for the chief's resignation.
I don't share Victor's views. I'm sorry that he feels that way, I really am. But if the Chief Constable is a menace to anybody, he's a menace to the criminals in this particular county.
There can be few more powerful critics of a police force than a man who's seen his wife shot dead in front of him. But there are many points on which Victor Bates and the Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire would agree. Police officers here are struggling to cope, and a lack of resources means they're losing the fight against violent crime. The question now is whether Steve Green is the right man to continue that fight. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Nottingham.
Camilla Parker Bowles will, after all, automatically become Queen when Prince Charles succeeds to the throne, unless there's a change in the law. The need for a change in the Constitution was made clear by the government today. Mrs. Parker Bowles has said she wanted to be named Princess Consort when the Prince of Wales becomes king. After the suicide bombing in Qatar at the weekend, in which a British man was killed, more than 1,000 people have staged a protest against the terrorists. They were shocked at the attack in a part of the Gulf which has so far been untouched by violence. It is a worrying development, not just for the people of Qatar and for the expatriates who live there, but also for other states in the region. Paul Davis looks at why Qatar was targeted and the implications for the other Gulf states in tonight's briefing.
Until now, Trevor, the smaller Gulf states have managed to protect themselves from the terrorism that followed the war on Iraq. But Saturday's suicide bombing suggests their security can't be taken for granted. Worrying for the states and for the expats living there. Qatar is home to 5,000 Britons, and it's not hard to see why it was targeted. America's Central Command is there, the base for the war on Iraq. It's wealthy. It has the third largest gas reserves after Russia and Iran. It's booming, growth 8.7% from higher oil and gas prices. Qatar is also high profile as the home of the Arabic news channel Al Jazeera. Politically, it's becoming more liberal, angering some traditionalists. And it's influenced by Western investment and Western values. Alcohol is allowed in hotels. The other smaller Gulf states, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates, have even bigger British populations. 7,000 in Bahrain, 80,000 in the United Arab Emirates. They too have close links with the West. In the Emirates, in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, Westernization has gone even further. This is the kind of image the Gulf states want to promote. Carefree tourism in Dubai, whereas Agassi and Federer found last month, all you have to worry about is lost tennis balls on top of this luxury hotel. Oil wealth and tourism, a vision that could so easily be shattered by the arrival of terrorism.
The populations and the expatriates must feel really horrified at these acts because they got used to such wonderful tranquility and calm. Crime rate in the state of Qatar and other Gulf countries are almost non-existent. Therefore, such an ugly and monstrous act like this is bound to create some panic.
Al-Qaeda has repeatedly struck against Western citizens working in Saudi Arabia, but many of its operatives have been killed in battles with the Saudi security forces. There is a fear that the terrorists may now be moving into the smaller Gulf states in search of easier targets, as well as issuing a warning that no one is safe, Trevor, from their extremism.
Paul Davis reporting. On the markets today, the FT 100 share index closed slightly higher at 4,933, up 10 points. The Dow Jones fell to its lowest level for 7 weeks, closing at 10,565. That's down 64 points. And the pound is trading at $1.8970, down 2¼ cents. And now, with tonight's sports news, here's Felicity Barr.
Thank you, Trevor. You're a liar. That's the astonishing accusation levelled at Chelsea manager Jose Mourinho by UEFA today. In an unprecedented attack, UEFA have charged Mourinho and 2 of his assistants for creating a poisoned and negative ambiance ahead of the second leg Champions League clash with Barcelona. Chelsea and their manager have yet to respond to the comments. Emma Murphy reports.
He's been dubbed the enemy of football. Now it seems football's authorities are fighting back, accusing Chelsea coach Jose Mourinho of lying. He, the club and 2 senior officials are charged with bringing the game into disrepute. The charges follow Chelsea's 2-1 defeat in the first leg Champions League clash with Barcelona. Mourinho claimed Barca's coach Frank Rijkaard entered the referee's dressing room at half-time. Though Rijkaard and referee Anders Friis denied the allegations, the official quit days later after death threats from Chelsea fans. UEFA say the claims were a deliberate attempt to poison the relationship between the 2 clubs.
The sanction could range from a simple reprimand or a warning to exclusion of the club from the competition, the reversing of the match result, or the suspension of 1, 2 or of the 3 officials.
Roman Abramovich's team are already charged with appearing late for the game's second half and failing to attend the post-match press conference. Yet despite the gravity of the allegations, it's unlikely they'll be ejected from the competition.
It's highly unusual for UEFA to act in this way and accuse a manager of a high-profile club like Chelsea of lying. It means that they feel pretty confident that they have the evidence to act against Mourinho and punish him with a touchline ban rather than a fine.
Chelsea are now reviewing their position, no doubt all too aware that even their millions won't be enough to buy them out of trouble in this latest footballing clash. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Stamford Bridge.
The Football Association is to investigate a suspected tunnel brawl following the heated Midlands derby between Birmingham City and Aston Villa. The row at the end of the game is reported to have continued in the tunnel after the match. Punches were allegedly thrown, but the referee missed the incident as he was one of the last to leave the pitch. Scotland rugby coach Matt Williams looks set to be sacked. Reports tonight say Williams will soon be dismissed after a run of just 3 victories in his 17 matches in charge. And London Mayor Ken Livingstone has admitted that Paris is most likely to win the race to host the Olympics in 2012. However, Livingstone did say that London is closing the gap on the French capital. And that's all of tonight's sport. Trevor.
Thanks, Felicity. I'm back in a few minutes with a reminder of our headlines and a look at some of the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. First, though, let's rejoin our ITV colleagues around the country to find out what's been going on where you are tonight.
Good evening, this is Anglia News. There were astonishing scenes in Spalding at the weekend. More than 1,000 people queued for up to 8 hours just to register with an NHS dentist. Carl Heidel reports.
When this practice opened at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, the queue already stretched up the road and around the corner. People were so desperate to get an NHS dentist that some even slept in their cars overnight.
The queue not only wound its way around the corner, it also went to the bottom of the street. Most people turned up at 6 in the morning, not wanting to miss out on cheaper dentistry. Going private normally costs twice as much as going on the NHS. When dental staff walked the entire length of the queue, it took them 10 minutes.
The queue eventually ended up here, half a mile from the practice. More than 1,000 people had been standing in it, with those at the back having to wait at least 8 hours before they could register.
A session in the dentist's chair is not everyone's idea of fun, but on Saturday they were literally queuing around the block. So what makes so many people want to wait in a line?
I think it's very important that we have more national dentists because it is so expensive to go private.
Lisa Jameson started her practice in Spalding 3.5 years ago. Currently, 4 million Britons don't have an NHS dentist, and Lincolnshire is one of the worst affected counties. The county needs 74 more NHS dentists. 5 have been recruited from Spain, and Lisa has employed one of them.
Well, there's such a desperate need in this area for national health dental treatment. There hasn't been any dentists taking on national health patients for quite a time now.
The government has failed to deliver on its promise that everyone would have access to an NHS dentist by 2001.
To ease some of those immediate access problems, we've made £59 million available. Spalding is an area that has benefited from that. We've said we'll recruit 1,000 extra dentists by October.
But Lisa says the government isn't doing enough.
Are there any incentives to become an NHS dentist then?
Not really. No.
So why do you do it?
Because I like the job and because it's important that people can access dental treatments.
The good news is that everyone who queued up on Saturday is now signed up with Lisa's practice. Carl Heidel, Anglia News, Spalding.
The funeral has been held of 2 women murdered in their own home near Leighton Buzzard. Iris Jones and her adopted daughter Mandy Joseph were found dead at their house in Hockliffe on January the 20th. They'd been shot. 3 people from Beccles in Suffolk have been charged with their murders. The funeral was held at All Saints Parish Church in Leighton Buzzard. There's been yet another ram raid, this time in Cambridge. The thieves once again got away with a cash machine. It's thought they used a silver transit van to smash through the front door of Hazelwood Stores in Hazelwood Close at around 3 o'clock this morning. The police say they believe the raid was carried out by 4 men wearing Parker-style jackets. A 60-mile-an-hour speed limit is being planned for the A14 between Cambridge and Huntingdon. The Highways Agency has secured funding, but it hasn't yet agreed the final details. The speed limit will be enforced by a network of speed cameras, which will measure average speed over a section of the road. Work could be finished by April next year. Soccer now, and they flocked to the Abbey Stadium to support Cambridge Fans United Day and saw a great victory over Wycombe Wanderers, which could yet herald a great escape for the heavily in-debt club. Linda O'Brien was there.
The united colours of football, side by side from every corner of the footballing world, together for one day to support the plight of Cambridge United.
Today will be one of the safest grounds in the country to be at, and there will be enemies standing next to each other having a ball.
It doesn't matter what team you support, it's about supporting the game, it's about supporting a club in trouble. Absolutely amazing. I've got a really warm feeling about today. It's superb.
We really want them to survive, because we know what it's like. We've been in the same position, and fortunately we have survived, and we hope Cambridge do as well.
There was a bit of football to be played too, and what skill from Taz Bramble on his home debut. 2 goals in 2 games since his arrival from Southend. Wycombe fans were supporting the pride of Cambridge, but not on the pitch. Gus Uhlenbeck scoring through a crowded defence. But the carnival atmosphere was to be reignited when Justin Walker's corner was side-footed into the net by the other home debutant. Ewan Roberts with a smile as wide as those on the terraces. Wycombe almost equalised through Nathan Tyson, a man Luton were keen to sign. And the crossbar denied Shane Tudor. A fantastic day for the fans, and the 3 points, a 2-1 victory, doesn't take the ewes off the bottom, but it gives hope.
It was played, as I said, in a hard but fair manner. And I mean, if you see a better goal than Tess Bramble's, then you'll have to show it me.
Indeed, a fantastic strike by Bramble, which more than 4,600 fans got to see. Fans united for one day, a day to remember. Linda O'Brien, Anglia News at the Abbey Stadium.
More honours for the Milton Keynes-based badminton Olympic silver medalists Gail Ems and Nathan Robertson. Already ranked the best pair in the world, they beat the Indonesian team in the final of the Swiss Open only a week after winning the mixed doubles title at the All England Championships. Congratulations to them. Now it's time to see what the weather's got in store for us. Here with the forecast tonight is Wendy Harrell.
For a clearer forecast, the Financial Advice Service from Norwich and Peterborough Building Society, sponsors of Anglia Weather.
Good evening. Rain is steadily working its way towards us and will stick with us tomorrow, but Wednesday is looking bright and mild. But for now, you may see cloud building if you're in the southwest of the region. By midnight, it'll bring outbreaks of mainly light rain, lows of 8 degrees in brisk southeasterly winds. So a rather grey and damp start for most tomorrow. By midday, though, dry weather will spread in from the west. For the afternoon, bright spells and the occasional shower. Highs of 15 degrees in the west, 14 across Norfolk, but down on the Essex coast, more like 11 in that southerly wind. But an improvement on Wednesday, temperatures back up to 16 degrees in sunny spells and a light southwesterly wind, just the odd isolated shower. That's it for today. Have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Norwich and Peterborough Building Society, sponsors of Anglia Weather.
That's the news, sport and, of course, the weather from Anglia so far this evening. Now it's time to hand you back to Trevor MacDonald for tonight's national headlines. Bye-bye.
Hello again. A reminder of tonight's main news. The Conservative leader Michael Howard is facing accusations of bigotry over his plans to outlaw illegal traveller camps. An American judge is tonight deciding whether to reconnect the feeding tube of Terri Schiavo. She suffered brain damage 15 years ago. And Victor Bates, whose wife was shot dead in their jewellery shop, has blamed the Nottinghamshire Chief Constable for the lawlessness there. It's time now for a look at the front pages of some of tomorrow's newspapers. The continuing drama of the upcoming royal marriage dominates the front page of the Times. Camilla will be queen unless MPs change the law is the headline, and not princess consort, as Clarence House insists. The Telegraph leads with that criticism of Nottinghamshire police by the husband of the murdered jeweller Marion Bates. Tory revival runs into the sand is the headline on the front page of The Guardian. Their latest poll reveals that Labour's lead is now stretched to 3 points. Its picture is of Michael Howard. And The Independent has a picture of the countryside under the headline, The End for GM Crops. The paper says that after 5 years, the final British trial confirms that genetically modified crops are a threat to wildlife. And that's it tonight. Coming next on the ITV News channel, the husband of Marion Bates speaks about the condemnation of the Nottinghamshire police force. We're back tomorrow, same time, 10:30. From all of us here, good night.
It's like a fat wizard riding a dragon. It's a whale playing golf. Look,
He's in the bunker.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by Powergen.
Hello, good evening. If you haven't seen the rain by now, you soon will do, and that rain will continue extending east, so reaching most places, if not all places, by the end of the night. Good deal of cloud coming in behind, so thankfully we're in for a mild night. Now, tomorrow morning it's going to be very dull and misty, that rain continuing to plague many eastern counties, misty and cloudy across many western fringes. Certainly skies will brighten up through the afternoon, certainly brighter weather coming through. I think the only exception really being East Anglia, the far northeast of Scotland, and later on tomorrow as well, 1 or 2 fairly sharp showers for Wales and the West Country. But temperatures still not looking too bad. Highs around 14 or 15 Celsius, possibly a 16 in any brightness. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
I don't know what it is. It's a banana, but he's crying.
Positive energy from Powergen.